Who the fuck is Don Plob? An author's note. I don't know and have never met Elvis Costello or Conan O'Brien, but I was struck with a sense of kinship while listening to their recent podcast. When Mr. Costello was handed a 1946 Martin by its owner, Mr. O'Brien, he spontaneously performed John Sebastian's ode to his dispirited friend, Rainbows All Over Your Blues. It was quite intentionally chosen. Anyone who's listened between the lines over the years knows Conan has spent time in therapy doing the work, as they say, on the darkness that plagues him. Mr. Costello, as sensitive a soul as you'll find, not only surprised his friend with that performance, but also having tailored a single line to personalize this version. That line, "At night, you've been watching the dark side of the moon," became, "At night, you've been listening to the dark side of the moon." That hit home for Conan, but also for the thousands of other kids growing up in the 70s and 80s who would lie awake using Pink Floyd as an antidote to the ruminating thoughts preventing them from sleep, while the rest of their classmates got an appropriate amount of rest to be functional at school the next day. I, too, listened to Dark Side of the Moon, and The Wall for that matter, on countless sleepless nights worrying about literally everything. Darkness often strikes early for those of us afflicted. Learning to say, "I give up," as Mr. Sebastian suggests, is sound advice for sure, but also far easier said than done. I'm still working at it. Introduction. An unlikely beginning. It's the summer of 1978. I'm 10 years old, and I'm about to enter the 5th grade. My adolescent ears are glued to Wisdom 1480 and their larger-than-life DJs who spin songs of their choosing, not confined by the algorithm-produced lists to come decades later. Much of the airwaves are filled with the Bee Gees, Andy Gibb, Donna Summer, Olivia Newton-John, and Captain and Tennille. It was a strange time to be alive. But snuck in between, and mostly at night, are bands like Queen, Kiss, Cheap Trick, The Cars, Alice Cooper, and Heart. Artists that one day will define classic rock. I'm starting to ask for albums as Christmas and birthday gifts. I begin eyeing what my own home stereo system might look like once I earn enough lawn mowing money to replace the clock radio in the room I share with my younger brother with a Sansui or a Pioneer from Crazy TV Lenny at American TV. And I fantasize about going to my first real concert. Rather out of the blue and with little fanfare, the parents announce that the whole family will be going to the Dane County Coliseum, Madison's musical mecca, to see a rock concert. My heart races with anticipation. Who will break the seal? Who would be the first of the hundreds of bands I'll eventually see over the next 4 decades? Van Halen, Sweet, Bob Seger, REO Speedwagon, Bruce Springsteen, Alice Cooper, ELO, and Cheap Trick all have dates booked in Madison this summer. My very first show may very well be epic. So when the name Sean Cassidy is uttered, I think I've misheard. Time stands still for a moment. Who? What? What the fuck did they just say? Sean fucking Cassidy? The teenage heartthrob with top 10 hits like Da-Do Run Run and Hey Deanie. The same guy on the front of my sister's pajamas. And then it hits me. These tickets are not for me. I'm the younger brother of a 14-year-old girl who's about to see her first boy band. These are hers. We're all just going along for the ride. Well, motherfucker. Well, here's how that train wreck unfolded. We were in the very last row at the very back and top of the arena. And this was long before big video screens and even bigger sound systems. So poor Mr. Cassidy looked like an ant and he sounded like shit. We shared binoculars to confirm one of TV's Hardy Boys was actually in our town. But do not fret, young squires, for an unanticipated silver lining unfolded in front of this completely unprepared, sold-out, prepubescent audience. Before Mr. Boy Band hit the stage, there was an opening act. When the curtain went up on Virgin, you heard that right, Virgin, With their abundance of long-haired guitar players, I went from sulking to, hey, give me the binoculars. Remember, the crowd was 99% teenage girls and their moms. Virgin was discovered by Gene Simmons of Kiss. These guys were a fucking rock band. I suspect the majority of those mother-daughter duos were horrified, but I couldn't contain my excitement. I want to do that. And so began my journey. It really did start that day. The day that provided my answer to the question everyone gets asked 100 times as an adult, what was your first concert? My answer just became Virgin. That journey, however, was made quite complicated by factors that went misdiagnosed or undiagnosed altogether during the 70s when parents, teachers, and doctors alike looked at you and said, "It's like you're depressed." What would a kid have to be depressed about? That's a direct quote, by the way. What follows is the meandering path of an unabashed music geek, flash-in-the-pan rock star, and lustful Gen Xer who just never grew up. Or, maybe more accurately, was born grown up, which is not as awesome as it sounds. On one hand, a modern-day Peter Pan, but on the other, a silent sufferer of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and a crippling lack of confidence and self-esteem. When hell a cocktail, if you plan to perform in front of people, whether in leather pants or a Hugo Boss suit. I did both. The result was massive pendulum swings from unbridled confidence to deep, dark self-loathing, isolation, and sadness. A lifetime of living in the shadows is about to be cleansed by an abundance of written sunshine. Well, fuck, that sounds depressing as hell. But do not fear, reluctant reader. A lot of unique, laughable stories were forged along the way in and out of the music industry, deep inside the beast that is high-tech startup world, within the confines of a Fortune 500, and partnering with your best friend to help lead what our 10-year-old at the time called a, quote, weird but awesome family. Whether this proves to only document a rather untraditional life, or provide even the slightest bit of inspiration, ultimately lies with you. But the first chapter is called Aquanet and Leather Pants, so at least stick around to see how that panned out. Part 1, Aquanet and Leather Pants, intro only. In 1990, something happened on the Madison radio landscape that hadn't happened for years prior or years since. The mighty Z104 was dethroned as the #1 station in the market. A brash newcomer popped up out of nowhere on the lower end of the dial, calling themselves the Fox. They were 94.1 WTFX, and they were inescapable. Billboards, TV ads, live remotes, in-person rock star meetups. They did all the conventional promotions, but broke a few taboos as well. One big one? That summer, they played the shit out of an unsigned band. That band was Tambora, and I was its bass player, background singer, and self-appointed spokesperson. How we all got there is where I'll start all of this. Photo caption. The 1990 WTFX stage at Madison's Taste of Madison was the first time anyone had the audacity to try to stage a concert at the annual food festival. As documented in numerous Kodak disposable camera photos, thousands of teenagers shut down that corner of the Capitol Square. Today, the End of Summer Restaurant Showcase features huge stages with national acts. That had never been done before 1990. Long forgotten WTFX deserves all the credit. Excerpt, Quiet Riot. The first metal band to have a #1 album was Quiet Riot. In November of 1983, Mental Health knocked Police's Synchronicity from the top spot on the Billboard Top 200. Their cover of Slade's Come On Feel the Noise hit #5 on Billboard Top 40, and Mental Health, Bang Your Head, with its catchy chorus and infectious riff, became an anthem for rock kids all over the world. I discovered them on MTV and was mesmerized by the sound, the look, and the songs. I had just turned 16 when those songs hit and was all too happy to play them loudly in the family's 74 Olds Cutlass Supreme. Some kids were in no hurry to take their driver's test. I was the kid that scheduled it on his birthday and already had saved lawn mowing money and warehouse money to buy a real car stereo. That car would become infamous for its home stereo speakers installed in the floor of the gargantuan back seat. It was loud. Spin the clock ahead 7-ish years, and we get tapped to open for them. In fact, the show overlapped with my 5-year class reunion. Saying, sorry, opening for Quiet Riot that night was a nice excuse to miss it. So there I was, face to face with lead singer Kevin DuBrow and guitarist Carlos Cavazo. And not to overstate the obvious, but these guys were legends when I was fixated on every minute of MTV I could muster. Kevin was as tall as you heard he was. He wore jean overalls and looked, well, just like Kevin fucking DuBrow. Big smile, shook hands, was a sweetheart. Kevin was clean and sober at this time. He showed me his concoction of hot tea and honey to help his throat. We didn't hang, but the interaction was very warm. Not all headliners are as engaging with their openers. I didn't ask him to sign anything, which with the collection I now have was really stupid, but we did pose for a picture with him where everybody gave the cameraman the finger, so very metal of us all. Alas, I never got a copy of that photo. So that was Kevin. My interaction with Carlos was a bit different. Me. Hey man, huge fan. Really great to meet you. Carlos. Cool. You got any smack? Me. Well, no. How very rock and roll. Oddly, after the gig, we all ended up at a long table at Perkins for a very late-night breakfast. We Midwestern introverts sat together and basically talked amongst ourselves, while Quiet Riot and their tour manager did the same. What a blown opportunity. Excerpt, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend. Ever had a panic attack? A real one? People often rather flippantly say, oh, I had a panic attack. But you'd know it if you really did. If you haven't, and for your sake, I hope that's the case, a panic attack is a sudden episode of intense fear that triggers severe physical reactions when there's no real threat to your safety. Sounds fun, right? But your body's convinced danger is imminent, or more bluntly, it thinks you're about to die. For the record, they fucking suck. Now, the good news is not everyone who experiences periodic panic attacks develops panic disorder. Only those of us blessed with that kind of shit do. Mine are tied to one very specific type of trigger, the irrational fear of being trapped. Pause for a moment to think about all the places that may apply. Airplanes, elevators, stairwells, Ubers, buses, trains, those harmless revolving glass doors in front of nice hotels, Disney rides. The list is really fucking long. That beauty of a stressor is called cleithrophobia, and I'm its poster child. I haven't been in an elevator in nearly 8 years, and I've only been on a couple of heavily medicated plane trips in that time. There's no guarantee I'll set foot in either ever again. Have I always been this way? No, thankfully I have not. A lot of work going into why they showed up and when they did and how best to combat them. I'm going to leave most of that out of the book, but other very important pieces of the puzzle that go back to the earliest memories of childhood are so intertwined to my story that we're going to go there a bit. Before rattling off the rap sheet, I do feel it's important to convey that I have a tremendous therapist, I'm medicated, and I'm safe. I've made remarkable progress and continue to do the work, but I'm not out of the woods. So, in no particular order, anticipatory anxiety, clinical depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder in the form of excessive ruminating thoughts, post-traumatic stress disorder, which most of us call PTSD, and panic disorder. Oh, and a whole fucking lot of trauma, most of which isn't going to be discussed. Excerpt. Everybody's got a rosebud. Rosebud. Charles Foster Kane's sled in the Orson Welles masterpiece Citizen Kane represented the simplicity, comfort, safety, and lack of responsibility he felt during the happiest parts of his childhood. After his long, successful, but highly complicated life, Rosebud was what he was thinking about in his final moments and uttering his final word. After much reflection, my Rosebud seems to be the late 60s turquoise Electrohome 652-1 metal box fan that I would lie in front of to read, daydream, nap, or sleep as a kid. The unique white noise and incredible force of air it produced gave me goosebumps, calmed my racing mind, distracted my invasive thoughts, validated my desire for solitude, and ultimately made me feel safe. It also seems to elicit positive memories of summer. I think a lot of Midwestern kids who lived in households without 24/7 air conditioning are nostalgic for the sound of a box fan in their window on warm evenings. My fan, it turns out, is a rather rare specimen. Thus, finding one in adulthood has been a challenge that technically remains unfulfilled. The exact model, branded Electrohome, was only sold in Canada, but was actually produced by much revered fan maker Lakewood out of Chicago. How my family ended up with this odd duck of a Canadian box fan, I still don't know. The closest I've come is the Lakewood P20, which, other than the badge and the front grille, is identical in every way. In an attempt to honor those good memories, but also make it more personal to my adult self, as you can see in the photo, I stripped away all the paint, leaving the metal bare. Not hard to grasp the symbolism of embracing part of what the fan represents, but also literally stripping away everything else. Excerpt, not yet categorized. As I rummage through old boxes and scan long-forgotten photos, I find myself drawn to this one. It's an awful lot going on in it, actually. This was the summer between my high school graduation and my first semester in college. That spelled real freedom for the first time. I had a car, I had a ridiculously smart and beautiful girlfriend, and I bounced around a bit when it came to being at home in the house I grew up in, or as far away from it as possible. This photo was taken in a church on the UW Library Mall. My friends Steve and Nate lived in the subterranean apartment below it, which meant I, or Julia and I, could stay there as well. First observation, there's a real independence in what I'll call my look. Those bright white jazz shoes, something rock stars like Eddie Van Halen were wearing at the time, were something I never could have confidently worn in high school. I eventually splattered them with paint a la Jackson Pollock. The acid-wash jeans would have pushed the high school boundary a bit as well. The cut-up Turtle Records tee certainly foretold another 4 decades of cut-up music shirts. I appeared to be wearing a bracelet. I have very little recollection of it. Another example of not in high school, that's for sure, but also a trend that continues to this day. Clearly the hair is starting to grow out, not yet dyed, that would come a bit later. The headphones I'm wearing are Sennheiser HD4 25s. Those should have been way out of my league, but I wanted pro gear from the very beginning. I was belittled growing up for having, quote, champagne tastes. My counter, that all I wanted was quality, fell on deaf ears. I think my biggest takeaway, though, is how the entire photo rather poignantly personifies the soul I was unaware of or refused to acknowledge for decades. I see a very sensitive, introspective young man deep in thought, trying to learn the ins and out of another new piece of technology, in this case, a Tascam 4-track recorder. There weren't a lot of smiles in the photos leading up to this new era, a lot more serious looks, and that's okay. I do want to tell him not to worry so much about literally everything, to really lean into that technological curiosity, to have the guts to leverage that curiosity into a career, to acknowledge and accept that sensitive soul and know that it's okay. And that A, he's going to still fit into that t-shirt 40 years later, and B, the love and lust of his life during that period remains so.